Brother Riley, would you open us in prayer, please?
Father in heaven, we thank you for the fellowship we can enjoy, the rest we've received, and we pray now that you would help us to learn, and we just pray that what we learn would benefit in the ministries where we serve, and that you would be honored through this, that we would not be enamored with technology itself, but that we would use the tools that you provide wisely for your glory and honor. We pray this in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
All right, thank you very much. So I like to look at what we're doing as, obviously we're in a spiritual warfare, and I think these make really cool pictures. So I titled it The Spiritual Warfare. You don't know what you don't know. I know that sounds kind of obvious, but so I'm going to be going through basics of, here's some things that you should basics of know, because I'm trying to cram like 4 different entire college degrees into one 45-minute session. And I used to teach all these things, and it was very hard trying to narrow this down just to 32 slides. So we're going to have to go pretty fast. I also have a short film in here just trying to get my point, because I'm a filmmaker, but when you watch this, remember, I am not an actor. And I had to act in my own film. So I apologize for the acting, but I had to make a film, because that's what I do.
Hey, Pastor. Thanks for meeting, Pastor. Sorry I'm late.
You know, I'll take a coffee break anytime. So what's up?
I've been thinking. I think God wants me to be a missionary to the Brazilians.
Hey, that's a new development. That's great. Do you speak any Portuguese?
No. Why would I need to know Portuguese?
Well, that's the language they speak in Brazil.
Really? Isn't Brazil in South America? They speak Spanish in South America, don't they?
No, you see, the Portuguese came over and that's not important. My wife and I use a great app on our phone to learn these new languages.
That's not. I don't care to learn another language. Like, I already know English. Why would I need to know Portuguese, whatever it was?
Okay. Do you know where in Brazil you want to go? Are there any missionaries you know there?
Oh yeah, I'm not planning on actually going to Brazil. Like, have you seen how hot and humid and it's like rainforesty everywhere, diseases, and there's like the wickedness down there and the politics? They're nuts.
Oh, right, yes. So you're going to minister to the Brazilians in your neighborhood. Oh, I didn't know there were that many around here.
I don't think I know of anybody that's Brazilian where I live.
I'm confused. So you want to be a missionary, but you don't know anyone, and you don't want to know their language, and you're not going to go where they live. What are you going to do?
One Brazilian dark roast?
Oh, that's mine. Brazilian coffee's got to be a sign. Thank you. That must be a sign.
I'm going to need to make mine a large now.
All right, so I think the point is pretty obvious. If that was someone coming to our church said they wanted to be mission Brazilians and that was their mindset, how many of you would want to support that missionary? No. I'm glad the hands didn't actually go up except for one. I'm pretty sure that's sarcastic. So, and that's good because I'm very sarcastic and you'll catch that through this as well. So we're going to look at some of the world's largest countries, the top 5 countries by population. That's approximation. I didn't obviously get down to the exact number. That's a lot of people. And if we had someone that wanted to reach these mission fields, we would be like, well, you need to learn how to go. If you're going to go to India, you need to learn the language, the cultures. But our world now is actually more of a digital countries. The top 5, or in the top 4 digital countries where people spend most of their time, did you know the average American spends up to 12 hours a day on one of these, or in these platforms? Their real world isn't this. This doesn't exist anymore. The whole like metaverse and things that you've probably heard about, that kind of stuff, that's where their real world is. The world has gone pretty much entirely digital. They don't look at the real world as normal. I've talked to millennials and Gen Zers that basically go, why would I want to go outside? I have everything I need on my phone. So trying to reach them, the techniques and things like how we learned how to reach and minister to people back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, all before I was born. Well, technically I was alive in the 90s. But so, once again, with the spiritual battle, like we look at the different type of weapons through these different eras. If you tried fighting the Revolutionary War like the Romans did, the Romans would have been absolutely slaughtered. Or if you go the same thing, you try to go in Civil War, and we're in World War II, but you had Civil War weapons, who's going to win? The spiritual war that we are battling now is very different. Just like the Romans and the Greeks and the Britons and the early Americans, the tactics of how war worked. Sure, with the chaplains we've had here probably understand this way better than I did. The tactics have changed. We need to change our tactics of how we do ministry. Not what we minister with. The gospel, preaching, all those things still need to be the fundamentals of what we do. But our tactics of the spiritual warfare have changed. And we keep fighting the old tactics with the old weapons. We're wondering why we're losing the youth. This is why. The youth lives in a very different world than they used to live. So modern ministry tactics, these are the things that we're talking about. I know typically you're supposed to have the 5 points or 3 points in a poem. I have 5 points today because I'm teaching, not preaching. So I'm going to ignore the traditional 3 points. And once again, I'm trying to teach 5 complete college degrees into 45 minutes. So these are the basic things we're talking about here. I'm going to go over real briefly the different things, the techniques and tactics of them, and give you a checklist of homework of basically, this is what you need to do to see if what you're doing is actually being effective. And if you can't check off these checklists, you probably need to change something in how you're reaching people to be more effective in ministry. So the first things you need to determine is, who are you actually trying to reach with your meeting, your technology? Are you focusing more on your church members, or are you focusing more on the general public / evangelism? I've built websites for many different churches. Some of them want to have our website primary purpose is for church members. So we put a church directory, put the announcements, stuff like that onto the website. That's okay. I'm not saying that's wrong. But I prefer the other one where you're thinking your website is more of an evangelistic tool. You have the gospel message very, very clearly on the homepage. You have who you are, doctrinal statements. You have the ability, if someone wants to know the gospel, they can come to your website and they could know enough about the gospel to get saved. And you want it to be a way to get them to come into your church. And the people in your church, I know half the time people aren't actually listening to announcements and remember what it is, but they do have the opportunity. They can listen to announcements. They can have church emails, things like that. Your website, I think, should be more or less an evangelistic tool. But there are a couple different ones. But there are also other things. You're doing stuff on social media. Maybe this particular post isn't for just the general public. This is an announcement for the church that, our church service is closed tonight because of the snowstorm. Maybe you couldn't get a hold of everyone. You put your general announcement out. That's not really so much evangelistic post, but those are also still important to have stuff like that as well. So are we reaching the world? This is a phrase, we've all heard of WWJD. I don't think it's as common as it was when I was a kid. What would Jesus do? I like to look at it as WWJT. What would Jesus tweet? I think if Jesus was around today, would he have used Twitter? I think he would have. I think Peter, Paul, all those apostles, I'm pretty sure they would have been very actively engaged in the social medias. So the way I look at it is, a lot of people say, well, I don't want to be on this platform because that platform has a bunch of wickedness. Are we just supposed to reach the people that are clean and perfect, or are we supposed to reach the people where they are in their wickedness? Now, I'm not saying that we should go and do all the stuff they're doing. The platform itself is neutral. How a platform is used is not neutral. Just like a single note on a piano is morally neutral, but you can also do stuff with music that is debatable whether you should use it or not. So that's how I like to look at it. You have to think, just because I don't like this platform, like TikTok. I personally am not a fan of TikTok. I don't like TikTok. But part of the reason we don't like TikTok is because people who are Christians aren't creating content for TikTok. So yes, it's full of a bunch of stuff that we probably wouldn't want our youth being, but nobody's actually going out and being a TikTok missionary. I think we need more of these Christian contents put on these platforms where people are living, because that's just where they are. TikTok, the average user, I don't remember how exactly, because I didn't have this number exactly. I think it's something like 6 to 8 hours a day they will spend on TikTok, just swiping through videos. We can throw the gospel in there and they wouldn't even, if you come and talk to someone and try and give them the gospel, how often do people put up walls that they don't want to be reached? Because people, if you talk to them hey, you're a sinner, you're going to hell. Most people are like, no, I'm good. They're like, obviously that's maybe a little more blunt than you would typically do, but that's the point. But you can do something like that on TikTok, social media, where people are just going through tons of videos and they get the gospel presented to them and they don't throw up their walls. They'll sit there and watch the whole video. So I think that's something we need to think about. So the first thing about social media, some of the strengths we have with social media, it is a very interactive thing. So people actually ask comments, discussions. People will ask more questions behind the wall of a digital screen than they will in person. If they're in person, they just want to make you feel good, so you'll go away. A lot of times that's what happens. But on social media, they will ask some of the tough questions because they have that some sense of they don't know who I am. I can kind of stand behind my digital avatar, and now we can have discussions and ask real deep discussions. Not all the time, but it can happen. It's concise. You need to be very concise with it. You can't just blabber on and on. You want to try to get things in under 25 words. If you're putting things with words, your point has to be concise, but it's very, very quick and effective. If you have it short, your message goes a lot further very quickly before the people can even have a time to put up any walls of resistance. They already have read the truth. And also enters the homes without barriers. Especially during COVID, when we had with our church, we were reaching thousands of people that we wouldn't normally reach. That most people would never let the gospel into their home. Except for when we went online, they were totally fine with it. And we had a lot of people reaching out to us because of our social media and YouTube presence. So there's different strategies that we can use. If you're creating content and it's not something like this, your content's not going to go somewhere. I know a lot of people talked about, well, the conservative circles, they're shadow banned. They don't get as much traction as the rest of the people on social media. That's the real problem. Well, actually, if you look into it, most of the time, it's because the conservatives weren't doing these. They were putting out stuff out there and saying, why did my stuff not go viral and theirs did? Because your stuff stunk. Not talking about you just specifically. But I mean, in general, conservatives would just try to put out something and it was very dry. It wasn't entertaining. It didn't have any story. It didn't make them thought-provoking. It didn't have these basic premises that a successful social media campaign needs to have in the post. If you don't have these, it's not going to go anywhere. So don't whine and complain of being shadow banned if you didn't actually make your content something people actually want. So if you follow these strategies, yes, there are a few platforms that got shadow banned, but those are the ones that had millions of followers that were huge that social media specifically picked them out. But as the general public, I'm assuming most of you don't have 10 million plus followers. Anybody here have that? Okay, because if you did, you should come up here and speak. So those are the basics. Oh, also encouraging and inspiring. Those are the other things you want to have. You need to be consistent with your post. You want to always have, every Friday at this time we post something. So your followers, they get used to this is what's coming. And a lot of times you don't even necessarily know when your people you're following are posting stuff. It just has to be in your general routine. You're on your social media at this particular time. You always check it after work. So it's going to be a certain place within your social media feed every time. And eventually people will subconsciously just expect it. And if it's not there, they might not notice you're not there. But they'll almost always see you if you do that consistency. You'll have a much higher chance to do it. And just make sure it's good quality. Don't put up fuzzy images, poor quality. Hey, we put up pictures because people want to see pictures. Yeah, but that wasn't a good picture. You got to make sure you actually have good quality products as well. Social media content, here's the different type of ones you can do. Streams, those ones are really easy for a church to do because you can put a social media, you just do a live stream. And that can be evangelistic and for your general church public as well. Those are rather easy to share. Another thing I like to mention is that churches, your people, you want to encourage them every once in a while from the pulpit saying, hey, we are putting this out there. How about you share it on your social media? Don't just watch and be like, hey, it's great. If you share it, your friends will see it. Sharing it becomes an evangelistic tool. And doing that, that's how in Watertown, some of our Good Friday events, the last 2 years, we've been reaching over 20,000 people in our organic social media campaigns. I didn't spend any money, but it's because we said, hey, this is out there. We created good content, consistent, and our people were willing to share it. We reached over 20,000 people. Our population in Watertown is about 23,000. We reached 22,000 people this last year. We were 1,000 people short of reaching the town. I was really going for the whole population in town. I didn't quite get it. But it didn't cost me any money to do that. So that's kind of nice. A lot of the marketing stuff actually costs money. So the other things, you want to have good quality images when you share that. Images, videos are going to be things that are going to go the farthest in your social media presence. If you share a video, the social media algorithms, they know people like videos. People sit there and watch a bunch of videos. So put videos out there, they're going to watch more of it, so they show it to more people. You put out a picture, they're going to show it to more people. If you just put out a text-based post, it's not going to go very far because most people, sadly, just don't read. That's just the way it is. If it takes effort, people probably are not going to do it. So some of the images you can put out there, though, is something maybe like a sermon quote. Maybe it's like your key points in your sermon. Maybe you have your 3 points. And on Monday, you release point 1 with kind of a graphic behind it and a discussion underneath, like, how are you applying this to your life today? And then maybe on Wednesday, you put point 2. How is this impacting your life today? And you want to ask questions with it as well. So people can get engaged. They have to comment on it. And then maybe on Friday, you put your point 3. And Saturday, say, hey, this is what my sermon's about tomorrow. Here's the passage so you can read up on it in advance. So when you come to the sermon, it's not just brand new. You've already been meditating on it. We do this with our church. Every Friday, we release a 30-second video of Pastor Logan saying, this is what I'm speaking about on Sunday. We invite you to come. And we get consistently more people watch his 30-second preview of his sermon than actually see his sermon. In counting the people in person, Calvary is a rather large church. We typically have 2 to 3 times as many people see his preview as actually watch his sermon. So we actually have a larger reach with our online audience than we do in person, even though we have about 450 people on a Sunday. And then you can also put up your announcements. That'd be for your general public as well. But if you put it with pictures, people more likely to actually get engaged and watch it. So here's some social media homework. I think this is the last one. There we go. So this is kind of your checklist. These are the things, if you want an effective social media campaign, this is what you probably want to do. I'll leave the slide up just for a little bit, so you want to take pictures, take notes of it. If you're not doing these things, your social media is probably not going to go anywhere. That's just the way it is. If you follow all of these things, one of the annoying things about social media is it's not an overnight, you hit a switch and boom, it's all of a sudden better. You have a following of 10,000 people. That's not how it works. It's a 6 to 12 month process. When you change something before you're going to actually see the returns on it. But if you do something like this, you'll probably see a rather large change in about 3 to 6 months. And by 12 months, people are going to expect things, and you're going to become a solid part of their digital presence if you do this consistently for about 12 months. So I highly recommend going through a checklist of something like this. And if you want this later, I can give this to you later as well. Any questions on social media before we move on to the next one? Yes?
Under the hood with the buzzword of share, because to just push a button, everybody says, use share. But how does that actually work? Do I need a list of emails that things are going to go to? Or do I need a list of Twitter accounts that are people? How does under the hood sharing work?
In social media, basically, as you click the share button, and it'll pop up what gives the user usually 3 to 4 options. How do you want to share this? Do you want to share it as a link to send to somebody in a messenger? Do you want to share it without giving a comment on it, or you want to share it with a comment? So on social media, typically it's just click share. It pops up on their Facebook account, and all their friends have the access to possibly see it as well. If they have 700 friends, it won't go to 700 friends. It has the potential to see up to 700 different friends. So share is basically just click, there's a little, typically blue button, click share, and it says, how do you want to click it, submit, and then it shares.
Right? Not many people under 30 use it.
That's what a lot of people think. Active users on it is, I think right now, there are 2.3 billion users actively. That means they use it at least once a week. And we looked back at 2.3 billion is actually larger than all of the platforms have total users. People typically think of it as for the older generation. Facebook is kind of that general swath of everybody kind of uses it. TikTok is more the younger, about 16 to about 22, 25, something like that. Instagram is about the 22 to about 35-ish. That's kind of considered the transition between the Millennials and Gen Z app. Facebook is primarily used by 40 and up. That's about the only thing they use. But everyone under 40 still uses Facebook to some extent because it became so big that there's some accounts and things like that online that you can't get without a Facebook account. You just need that as your login. So people create the accounts, and since they have it, they get on. And I think it's 67% of Facebook accounts, so that comes out to about 2 billion people, use Facebook every day. They check it at least once a day. So it's generally thought of as the older people's, but once you actually go into the studies, it actually shows that the younger are still using it as well. Yes?
So my question is more in line with kind of the time commitment side of things, right? So I'm a younger guy, and I remember, I guess about 4 or 5 years ago, was really trying to work hard on our social media presence and all that. Facebook and Instagram, they're easy because they're tied together. They're both meta companies.
Yes.
You know, a lot of the younger people, Snapchat, all that kind of stuff, Vero, for different stuff. But my struggle was the time it takes to make, with just one pastor, right? The time it takes to take a quality photo, right?
Mm-hmm.
Process that into an image with your text or whatever on it, and then get that shared or schedule that in their business suite so that it'll try to keep up.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what I was finding is, being a small town guy, sometimes I'm preaching 7 services, 5 services a week, depending on nursing homes and veterans homes and regular services for the church, and trying to find an extra, basically, day to devote to scheduling then out the social media was the struggle. So how do you guys solve that?
It's not your job. Very, very big. I'm sorry.
Neither is the plumbing, but
I'm sorry. I couldn't resist saying that. I couldn't resist that. I actually talked about it in my very last slide, but I missed it here. So basically, the pastor's job, as I see it, is more or less to be the one who preaches the word, disciples, and helps the church grow spiritually. Yes, there are times where you have to do other things. I get that. My dad was the pastor here for years, and I know how many times I saw him over at midnight coming over here to make sure the heat was on and things like that. Things that I remember as a kid, like, why is he doing that? Like, just go to bed. But I understand that's what happens. But this particular thing, what is nice about it is the youth, they are more likely to want to do something. I know it's kind of scary to hand over the social media stuff, like this kid's 14 years old. The 14-year-old probably knows more about it than you do. But you have to create a structure of, yes, you can create the content. Here's the basic structure of what I want done. Before you post it, run it by me. You are the one who gets to ultimately click the go button. But they work on and create it. And if it becomes their thing, it is amazing how far they will take it and how much better of a job they will do than you. Because when they're 14, frankly, they have more time than you do. And they want to play with all this technology stuff. And they're actively in the social media stuff all the time, seeing what works and what doesn't. Innately, it'll become something they do. So try and find someone that is a little bit younger, that has a little more time, that will be willing to work with you. So that you're not the one necessarily creating all the content, but it doesn't go live without your approval. Even when I took over our church's, most of our social media stuff, for the first about year, 18 months, I didn't post something without running it past my pastor first. We got to the point where we understood each other. Okay, yeah, I can do this. I shouldn't do this. He's okay with that. Let's tweak this. So I got a pretty good feel of what he's doing. Now I can just go, and he kind of watches every once in a while. He checks everything we do once it goes live. But there's the things that we check through, and we meet every once in a while. What are things we want to adjust and change? But that's why I recommend is find someone who's younger that wants to work with you. If you create the checklist of these are the things they need to do, they can check off all those things on every post. You don't have to worry about it every single one. As far as creating content, you just have to look at it once a week. And there's online platforms where they can create stuff out for a month. And you say, create a month's worth of content. I will look at it when it's ready to go. And you can look at the month and you spend 20 minutes with them once a month. And say, yep, we like that, change this a little bit. And then you're good to go. Everything schedules and goes automatically. That's my recommendation for that. Yes?
So you're saying stay away from social media like the new ones, True Social, I forgot what Dan Bongino uses, but different ones like that, forget it.
For the most part right now, I say, yeah, those aren't worth the extra time. I don't think they have a large enough reach to be something where going to True Social is going to make sense right now. If it gets a larger reach, right now I don't think it has the user mass, what they call it critical mass, where it's going to be something that's going to long-term really be effective. Now, if you want to create an account now so that when it does become bigger, that will be something to do. There was a couple accounts that we created with our church saying, hey, this is going to be something that's going to be big. And come to find out, their servers were based on something Amazon didn't like it, and Amazon shut them down. They lost everything. They lost, so it was like 300 million users. And they lost every lawsuit to get it back. So I set up accounts for things that didn't actually long-term work. But it might be something you can look at making an account so you have your name locked in if it becomes a big account. Later on, the social platform becomes big. You're not being like, oh, I'm Calvary Baptist 1235. That's the name of your, you go ahead and lock your name in now before somebody else takes it, but you don't have to actively do stuff on it. If the platform blows up, great, then you have it.
The reason I ask that is because there's people that want to get away from Facebook because of Zuckerberg's involvement in political things, Zuckerberg bucks and stuff like that. So it's kind of like, maybe we shouldn't have anything to do with Facebook and Zuckerberg's. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, And I get the argument for that. I don't particularly like putting money into my campaigns where he actually gets money out of it. If I post stuff and I don't put money into it, it costs him money. So I'm okay with him spending money for me doing my stuff, and I still get a reach with it. But because of how large of a platform it is, and that's where people actually live, it's like, okay, I don't want to go to, we don't want missionaries in Iran, because if we send missionaries over there, if they buy something, the money goes to the Iranian government. Well, the money's going to go somewhere eventually. But are we going to reach the people or say, well, the guy in charge is a bad guy, so we're not going to use their platform. So we're not going to reach where that mission field is. And that's where you're going to have to decide amongst yourself, is that where you actually want to go? I think it's a platform that we want to go with. Yes, the guy in charge is probably not a guy that we would probably really want to be great friends with, but he created something that the world is using. That's where the world lives. We need to reach the people where they are. Does that answer that question? And once again, it's a personal philosophy. You have to decide what you want to do with your church, but that's my reason behind it. Anyone else? Yes.
I know you mentioned about other forms of social media. Where would you classify YouTube, Rumble, and using those kinds of things? Where do you see that as a part of this whole discussion? YouTube is
Rumble. I haven't so much concerned with Rumble, but YouTube is technically considered a social media platform. That's why I put it on there as actually number 2 in the largest social media platforms at like 2.4 user accounts. So yeah, it's technically a social media platform because there is the capacity to discuss back and forth with your the content creators and other people are in that world as the comment section. So they do classify as a social media platform. Any other questions? Yes.
Just not a question so much, but Facebook is big, but Facebook will close you. They shut me down, and I got a church of under 20 people. They didn't like to hear what was socially unacceptable. I got a warning.
They shut you or your church down?
Shut the church down.
Okay.
Yeah, they shut our account. So we went to Rumble, and a little bit safer.
That's the first church site I've heard that's been shut down. There have been some lawsuits and things that have gone through that make it so Facebook is less likely to be able to shut down accounts now. Some of the lawsuits, if them shutting them down, you can say, hey, this was my free speech. You can challenge it, and they're supposed to unlock you now.
I don't have any professionals or even semi-professionals doing anything. I know nothing about what's happening behind the camera and all that. But, basically we said, this is for the people who, for some reason, can't get to church.
Yes.
And if it reaches somebody else because they share it, fine, well and good. But I wanted to have it present so our absentees would reach there, and then it was secondary.
Yes.
Is it going to reach out into the world?
Yeah, and that's right.
So a smaller vision than what you're talking about, but it was a start for us.
Yes, and that's what you have to decide. What is your purpose? Is it general public / evangelism, or is it for your church? Because there's a place for both of them.
Follow up on that. The Bible Bard, of course, we put out videos and audio stuff, and I have a Bible Bard account on Facebook, and when they saw we have 4 episodes about sex. What does the Bible say about sex? That's kind of a thing the world has heard. Bad things about what the Bible says about sex. And they twist things, but we did 4. What does the Bible say about marriage? What does the Bible say about the extended family sex? Because in most of the world, there's a lot of sex that goes on in a big extended family. You can see it in the Bible. All you have to do is just read thoughtfully. And then homosexual sex. When they got to that one, I published that one. They shut me off because that was offensive to some of their readers or their listeners. And a year later, they let me back on because it's just what you said. They got sued. They had problems. And I was just quoting a scripture. And they couldn't take it.
Yeah, and because it's less likely to shut down than before. Doesn't mean it can't. Yeah, so it can still potentially happen. It's less likely to happen now. And there are places like, is that the appropriate place to put a content? Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't put that up, especially what you're doing. But there's some things, is this the appropriate place to do it? If I went to someone and was going to try to share the gospel with them, am I going to start off with saying homosexuality is wrong? You need to get over it. Or am I going to share the gospel first? So you got to think, what is the appropriate place to share different topics of Scripture? I'm not saying you need to back away from what the Bible says about these different topics. But you have to think about social media. It is your first presence for things. And if someone came to me and said, you know what you're doing is absolutely awful and never shared me the gospel until I fixed this problem, I'm probably not going to get saved anyway. So you want to think about your social media is your first exposure to most people when they see you. Is that really what you want as your first experience with them? Because I know when I talk to my neighbors, they smoke, they drink, that stuff. My first discussion with them isn't, you need to stop smoking because that's going to kill you. That's probably not the best way to actually get that good connection with my neighbor. I'm not saying you should back away from doing that, but you need to think about, is that what you want to actually be openly sharing as your primary? Does that make sense? I'm not trying to say get away from that, but yes.
In the past 2.5 months, Facebook has taken down several of our posts from our church page that were just, nature scenes with a simple verse over it. One was, "This is the day the Lord has made; I will rejoice and be glad in it." That whole picture was removed from the account, as if it had never been posted. So
yeah.
It all started after we had a worldview conference and posted some of our live streams up. Those didn't get affected, but after that, now
there were
very random.
Facebook does have occasionally, like if they take something down, they're supposed to tell you. So if they actually took it down, they're supposed to tell you that they took it down and why. So if it's not there anymore, there's a couple things a lot of people think, well, Facebook took it down. I'm not saying they didn't, but a lot of times it's user error. They thought it was posted. Sometimes you can actually put posts that are actually timed posts that will, after a certain period of time, go away. And you might actually turn on a setting and then don't even know it, that it's only going to be up for a week and it goes away, because that's what it's designed to do. You can have timed releases and timed deletes. Another thing that sometimes happen is while in the process of creating another thing, it might accidentally delete a post if you're in your schedule planners, if you're doing something like that. Another one that can happen is Facebook has had the last couple months a lot of server issues where stuff was just disappearing. So they weren't necessarily going after certain accounts. They just had servers fail and they lost stuff. Okay, if you did get
fact-checked it and it wasn't accurate.
Okay. If you got a message, then yes, it was Facebook. Did you go and challenge those?
I don't think so. A person in my church posts those and monitors.
Okay, because you can go back and challenge some of them a lot of times to say, this is what we were trying to do. We weren't trying necessarily to put a fact or not, and a lot of times they'll put it back. If it's because it needs to get manually reviewed then by Facebook then, and then a lot of times they'll put it back this wasn't a fact or not fact thing. This was just your post of your belief. And then you can get it back. Because once again, they had a lot of lawsuits about freedom of speech and freedom of religion, and they lost most of those. So if you challenge, a lot of times you will get it back if you get a message like that. Anyone else? Because we're 35 minutes into point 1 of 5. Okay, so we're going to go through the other ones rather quickly. We probably won't go through all of them. I will put up, if anyone wants the checklist for your other platforms and websites like that, I will have those here if you want to come look at those. So the next one I think is really important is your website. If you don't have a website, you don't exist in the modern age. That's basically how it works. So I'm assuming most of you have a website, or at least in the process of doing one. If you don't have a high-quality website, you also might as well not exist to most of the world. You obviously should exist, but you know what I mean. As far as the general public is concerned, it is your front door. And if someone came to your church and the handle fell off the door when they opened up the door, are they going to go inside your church building? I would assume the answer is no. Now, if they do, that person's got more nerve than I do. But I would probably be nope. We're going somewhere else. If your website does the same thing, if it doesn't do what they expect it to do, they click something, it breaks, it doesn't do what they expect to do, or it looks ugly, they walk up to it and the door is falling off. Digitally, your door is falling off. They just basically don't care that you exist. They're going to go somewhere else. I think the number is now up to over 90% of people who visit a church, is something like 95%, will visit your website first. And if they don't get a good first impression or they don't see your website, they don't come. So, do you have an effective website? Hopefully the answer is yes. But what is an effective website? So here are 3 questions you need to answer within 3 seconds. Every site, if it doesn't answer these 3 questions in 3 seconds, your website is not effective, at least for outreach. Who you are, why do they care, and what can you do about it? If that's not on the top of the website, and they can't see that in 3 seconds, they're going to move on. They're going to click that little back button on top of the website, and they're going to move to some other church. Or they're just not going to go to any church at all. So here's a screenshot of my home church's site. So who we are is right there at the top. Let me get the mouse over here. So it's pretty obvious, Calvary Baptist Church. Who we are, we're loving God, loving people. Here's a little more extent of it and what they can do about it. Our live streams, our beliefs, and how they can reach out to us. And the other thing that they can do about it is they want to come to our service times. Anything that they actually need to know about our church is right on the top of the screen. So as soon as they go on the site, they have all of that information. Anything else is extra. It's fluff. It's maybe more details, nice to have, but they don't need to know it. If your site doesn't have something like that in the top, what they call top of the fold, or in the hero section, then they're just going to leave. They're not going to care. They're not going to do a whole bunch of scrolling, try and find where you are. If you answer those questions, then they will start clicking and scrolling. If you don't answer those questions, they're going to get frustrated. How many of you ever started scrolling something, but it didn't actually read what you're scrolling? You just kind of kept scrolling, like, where is it? You're not actually reading it, though. You just keep swiping. Or, computer, like, where is it? And you keep scrolling, and you didn't actually read any of the content. And you're frustrated that you can't find it. Well, because you're not reading. But if it doesn't have the visual engagement where it tells your eye where to look and read, then it's probably not. So search engine optimization. This is one of those things that's kind of confusing for a lot of people, basically because this is what Google pretty much owns the market in search engine optimization, which basically means if someone searches for you, can they find you? And Google doesn't actually tell you how they do it. Because if they did, they would lose the corner of the market because all their competition would do it as well. So there's general rules, basics of what they know with it. So your keywords, which is things that you talk about on your website. So you want to mention church, your location, your town. You want to mention like services, Bible, God. You want to mention these things a lot of times within your site because the more times you mention that, if someone's searching church in Milltown, there's not a lot of competition here. So you're going to rank rather high rather easily. But if you're in a larger community or there's a lot of other churches around, you have like churches near me, and you don't use the word church and things like that a lot, if you're like, well, I just put church in our website. It's Milltown First Baptist Church. And we put that at the top. Well, why can't they find? Well, you need to have it multiple places because Google looks through your site and says, how many times did they talk about church? Oh, well, they mentioned church 25 times. It's like, they're probably a church. So they will put you higher up in the search engine. Also, how fast your site is makes a big difference. So you might have a really cheap hosting, like, oh, it's great, it's cheap. But usually if it's cheap, it's cheap. I know that was really profound. But it didn't cost you a lot of money. It's probably slow. It's an outdated server. It's the one that they put on. It should have been retired, but we can make a little money out of it still. And Google says, if your site isn't fast, we're not going to load you up because nobody likes waiting. And a hundredth of a second makes a difference on a website. So that's a big deal. So you also, how fast your server, how good did you actually make your images so they will load quickly? User interface and user experience, how easy is it to actually search through and find things? Google knows how long people spend in your site. And if it looks like they're scrolling back and forth and trying to find something, they go, this site isn't very user-friendly. We're not going to show this to other people because the other people who visited your site got frustrated and left. We're not going to show you. Also, Google reviews, that's one that's become a really big thing in the last year or so. It's always been a big thing, but really big push thing. If you can get your church members to, hey, give a Google review about your church. I went to this church. I love it. Here's why. Here's 5 stars. That will probably impact how your church shows up online more than probably anything else you will do, is doing something like that. And the best thing is it's free, and however members you have in your church, you can get that many reviews, hopefully pretty quickly, and they can come back and review it every week even. Maybe if you do it that much, it might be a little bit much. But if you had 25 Google reviews, you're going to have more than any church in your area, and Google's go, that place is a good place because everybody likes it. They're going to put you at the top. So that's a good, easy, cheap way to do something. You want cheap, it's free. So links and backlinks, you want to connect to a lot of other sites that are big websites. Like, here's a resource. You link out to them. Google says, oh, this place is an authority in this circle. You're connecting to them. You're probably associated with them. we're going to put you higher up in the search engine. So you're going to more likely show up. So media tags and things like that as well. I'm going to have to skip through. So here's your homework for a website. Does your site pass these things? Answer who you are, those questions. Your SEO, does it have good Google reviews? Important information is easily accessible within 3 clicks. If people can't find what they're looking for within 3 clicks, they're not going to click anymore. That's just how it works. If it takes 4 clicks, that's too much effort. They'll go ahead and click the back arrow. That's not a problem, but they're not going to click another arrow or another button to go anywhere. And also, is your site branded? Does it have the feel and look of what your church is across everything else in your social media, your other things? We were going to talk about branding. I'm pretty sure I'm not going to fit that in 2 minutes because we aren't even halfway through, but we had good questions as well. Did everyone get this that needed this? All right, any questions on website stuff? All right, so we're going to move on to real quick with some, would you rather talk about branding or, no, I think I'm going to actually skip all these other ones, podcast, YouTube things. I'm going to actually load that up real quick here. Here's something that I recommend for a lot of you probably have thought about. It would be really good if I could write a blog, but I don't have the time to write 3 blog posts a week or whatever it is. I know there's a couple here that actually do blogs, which is great. The thing about podcasts and YouTubes and blogs is they actually carry more weight than an author does in the general public's eye today. They will go online and check their latest influencer, their YouTuber, their blogger, their podcast, before they're going to pull a book off the library, because that takes work and it takes effort. It's not sitting in my pocket. I can just load it up and say, what does this guy say? Oh, that's what it is. Okay, that must be the way it is. If we created more of these type of things with our churches, I think we would have a much bigger impact. Now, I know it's a lot of work. So something I have thought might work, this is obviously not me, I can't do it myself, is you could get maybe a group of other pastors. Hey, you're going to do a pastor's blog for the next generation of pastors or something like that. I know that's an issue we're having is there's not enough young pastors coming into ministry. So how do we fill in these empty spots in the churches now? Well, if maybe a group of 10 pastors got together, we're going to create a blog on how to train the next generation. What do they need to do to become a pastor? I don't have time to write a blog every week. Well, you get 10 pastors together, I'll write one week, you'll write one, and you all write 5 in a year. That's a little bit more easily manageable, and you can have 50, well, that'd be 50, not technically 52. You can do the math and figure out who gets the extra 2. And you could have a 1-a-week blog post by a pastor who've actually lived the world of a pastor and have the training. Because a lot of the blogs and podcasts out there are people who used to be a pastor that now have gone to blogging or podcasting, that they haven't actually been doing it for 15, 20 years. Well, can someone who hasn't been in ministry 15, 20 years ago, has ministry changed the last 15, 20 years? Yeah. So it's hard to have the relevance. You can actually say, this is what I have done today. Or the other thing a lot of seminaries have, which isn't anything knock against them, is a lot of the seminary professors have never been actually in ministry. They're training how do you do ministry, but they've never actually been a pastor. How many of you learned things probably in the first week of being a pastor that was not taught in seminary? Yeah. That's just but you can actually teach the thing. This is what I actually went through, and here's how I dealt with it. We had one missionary that came, he said, the very first week he had, and this was in the 70s, I think it was his very first week, the first person that came counseling to him said, I used to be a boy, what do I do? And this was in the 70s. Nobody had a clue what to do. He had never even heard of such a thing. And he calls up his professors and they go, have fun. And they didn't have an answer for it. There's tough topics that maybe aren't covered and are constantly coming up that seminary professors probably aren't as on top of some of these changes that are happening in the world as you are, because you're living in the front lines. So what maybe is something that could be done, that's just thrown out there as an idea. Maybe you can work together with other pastors to create a blog that would be able to create the reach, and it's not so much time dependent on each person. So I'm going to go through and skip to the last 2 slides because I'm sorry, Dad, I'm late.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Do you mind not eating another donut for a couple minutes?
Okay, so I know. The part I'm really sorry about, this is my dad's church. He never runs late, and I'm running late for him. So here's a couple final thoughts on how to prepare some media strategies. You need to create some type of media strategy. If you don't have this, it's going to be a whole lot more work. If you actually create a strategy and plan, things are a whole lot easier to do. You just follow your system. It takes maybe 10% as much time as trying to figure out every single time. Also, never start a ministry that no one is actually willing or interested in helping with, because otherwise it just becomes more and more work on top of you. And sadly, if no one is going to be there to help you with it, it might not happen. I think it's incredibly important to do this, but if no one's there, your job is not to do everything in the church. So the pastor's job is to preach, be a discipler, not to do every ministry, but also support the team that needs it. So maybe you have a live stream media or an audio AV team. Don't come and tell them how to do their job. But you give them the tools and suggestions. This is the general route we want to do. How can we make this better? That's very different than saying, we need to do this and this and this and this. Because if you're doing that, you're probably going to make your AV team never feel comfortable doing stuff for you. And they're never going to give you their best because they're always afraid if they do something, you're going to step on them. You need to give them the tools and the support to do it. And they probably know more about it than you do because they've been actively trying to do this. And another couple initial thoughts is, to build a strategy, you need to have your initial discussions. What are you doing? What is your plan? What are your goals? Build out your plans. Build the initial idea. You need to do your reviews, tweak it, review again, and then release. This is the basic strategy of how it works. It's the same thing with when we work through with clients building websites for them, building promotional videos. And usually what happens is most of the time we will build the initial build. This happens not just for us. This happens for with internal things. We send it out. Where'd my mouse go? There we go. We send it out for review, and we never hear back from it. If you actually want your site or your campaign or something to go live, I know you don't have a lot of time. You need to give feedback because it's your ministry. You're the shepherd for it. You have to give the feedback for it. You can't have like me as an outside agency, or once again, if we had your 14-year-old doing your social media, you can't expect them to know the ministry as well as you do. Because we've created stuff for our churches. I don't know the ministry as well as you do. I can't release a website without your thumbs up. Because that could be really bad. So you need to come back and give feedback, give reviews so we can tweak. And I've had some clients say, well, why didn't we release the website? You never told me what you liked or didn't like, and what content I need to change. Some sites I had where, I don't know if you're familiar with Lorem Ipsum text, where a computer just creates random gibberish. On their homepage, they said, why didn't we release our website yet? Because this is what's there. I can't talk about you. I can't give your personal testimony. I put in a fake personal testimony about how you're bragging how good and humble person you are. I don't think you want that going live on your website. Yes?
What you're saying, we got a media guy. He does a wonderful job on videos and
Good.
everything. But that feedback, I mean, he spends hours and hours and hours on this. And when I tell him, hey, we just had somebody come into church that said they watched me preaching, they watched it. So he just, wow, you just see his excitement because that work, there's fruit from it.
Yes.
So I think
that is huge.
It's just great.
Yeah.
Great point.
Encourage your people, review what they do, and make them feel like what they're doing is important. Because it is. And a lot of times, you've probably felt it too, where you feel like you're not appreciated. The same thing happens to people who are helping you. So make sure they feel appreciated. Usually the only time people notice them is when something doesn't work. And they're like, you just can't run this AV system. I mean, it failed again. Yeah, it failed 3 months ago on our last power outage. But the only time people remember anything happened. So that's good, yeah. Always give them compliments when you can. Yes, one last question.
Is it possible to get a copy of your outline?
Yes, it is. If you come, I do have, we're also talking about doing a vision conference where we actually have a weekend of talking about this stuff. I have 10 different experts in different fields ready to go. If people are interested in actually having a conference to do this again, we've done it 4 times before, that we will have much more about this. But if you sign up for that, I can also get your email address and send you the outline for this as well.